What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the big tampering issue that the NBA has right now. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Consider subscribing as well for more videos just like it. Check out my socials right here, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but the idea of tampering in the NBA would not even have occurred to me like 5 years ago. If someone had brought that up to me a couple of years ago and been like, hey, what do you think about tampering? I probably would have asked them, I don't even know what tampering is. But now it's arguably one of the biggest issues that the NBA has. And as we talk about all the time, free agency and player choice are two of the pillars of modern NBA team building. And sometimes those two things come together to form something that could very easily be construed as cheating. So what are we even talking about here? What is tampering? Well, essentially, it is a player or a team, typically from a bigger market, having conversations with a player that is under contract with another team, typically in a smaller market, about them coming to their team, whether it be via free agency or requesting a trade to be sent out of there to go to LA, New York, Miami, places like that. This has also been extended to another issue that people often refer to as tampering, where players are discussing free agency contracts and sign-in trades well in advance of when the league actually wants them to and when the league rules state that they should be able to do that. And we're going to talk about both of those things. So we'll talk about the first thing first. Tampering and the problems that it creates within the league is primarily brought up as it relates to the Anthony Davis to the Lakers situation. People claim that the Lakers tampered and actively pursued Anthony Davis while he was under contract with the Pelicans, and that is why he ultimately not only requested a trade from New Orleans, but was very adamant about the destination he wanted to go to, that being LA. Now, why do people think that's what happened? Well, because that's pretty much exactly what happened. The Anthony Davis trade rumors while he was still in New Orleans had been swirling for a couple of years, but things really shifted in September of 2018 when he signed with Clutch Sports Agency, which essentially is just LeBron James Incorporated. And less than 9 months later, he's a member of the LA Lakers. Seems a little odd that a player in Anthony Davis that has these trade rumors going on ends up signing with LeBron's agency, and then it takes less than a year for him to be teammates with LeBron, and then less than a year from there, they're winning a title together. Seems a little odd, right? Now, granted, publicly, what happened with Anthony Davis' trade request situation is pretty common in the modern NBA. He's a great player. The team wasn't very good. He's unhappy. He wants to be moved, and he uses his impending free agency as leverage to get to a place that he wants to be, that being LA. But the clutch component of this, and the idea that LeBron or the Lakers organization had direct contact with Anthony Davis about him coming to the Lakers while he's still under contract with the Pelicans, that's the core of what we're getting at here. And so strictly speaking, if we're talking about player-to-player interaction, LeBron has a conversation with Anthony Davis about what it would be like for him to be in LA, what it would be like for him to be a Laker, and pushing him towards that trade request. Strictly speaking, that is illegal. That does break the rules of the NBA. However, that's also how like every modern NBA super team ever has been put together. When you go look at Team USA teams where guys are having conversations, and it's been well documented that like the Heatles, they had conversations well in advance of actually signing with Miami, of them playing together, that being Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James. Plenty of Team USA guys have had conversations about that. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant have confirmed that they were planning on playing together, most likely in Brooklyn, well in advance of when either of their contracts expired, which again, technically, by the letter of the law, is tampering. The problem is the league has recognized that it's incredibly difficult to regulate on a case-by-case basis player-to-player interaction as relates to tampering. It's not like they're going to wiretap these guys' phones. It's not like they're going to follow them around every single, face-to-face interaction that they have. It's incredibly difficult to regulate and to prove that LeBron had a conversation with Anthony Davis while he was under contract with the Pelicans that pushed him towards requesting a trade and specifically ending up with the Lakers. And so the league has kind of let this slide by, specifically with player-to-player interactions. And they've basically said that they can't regulate it. There's no way for them to fix it, and it's going to continue to be an issue. And yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem. It continues to widen the gap of advantages of being a bigger market versus a smaller market team. We almost saw it with Giannis. He ended up re-signing the Supermax to stay in Milwaukee, but there were teams, I'm sure, chirping in his ear about going this way and that way. We saw it with Anthony Davis. We've seen it with Kawhi Leonard basically going to Paul George and saying, hey, I want to play with you, and then they end up trading for Paul George, and those things aren't as negatively perceived because they didn't directly lead to a title like LeBron James's did, and because of how seemingly obvious it was the wrongdoing between LeBron and Anthony Davis because of the clutch connection of all this. But that's not the only form of tampering that people bring up and people get upset about. It's not technically tampering by the definition of it, but it just kind of falls under this whole umbrella of like free agency wrongdoing shenanigans. And that is players and teams having conversations about sign-in trades as well as contracts well in advance of when free agency begins. Think about when NBA free agency starts. If you have your Woj notifications, your Shams notifications on, NBA free agency for the last couple of years has started at 6 p.m. Eastern time. At 6:02, there's like 15 contracts that have already been handed out in crazy amounts. How did teams and players negotiate that in 2 minutes? Well, they didn't. And what every single team in the league is doing, and most players in the league are doing, is they are negotiating these contracts. They're having conversations with teams well in advance of when free agency actually opens, which again, technically is against league rules. It's not tampering, but they're kind of jumping the gun on what they're supposed to be doing when it comes to free agency. And where teams really get into trouble, and the two teams that are currently being investigated in regards to this, are those sign-in trades. In this case being Kyle Lowry to the Miami Heat and Lonzo Ball to the Chicago Bulls. Both those teams are under investigation right now for potentially breaking league rules in those sign-in trades, because the league looks at this and they say, okay, we get that this player and this team might have had conversations early, but it's really difficult to prove. But how did you have a sign-in trade together in 2 minutes when you have to agree to the contracts beforehand and then come up with the trade negotiations? You can't do a sign and trade without knowing what Kyle Lowry is going to sign for in Miami. How did you have all those conversations in 2 minutes? And so that's why those two teams specifically are being investigated for their sign and trades, because of how quickly they came together and the fact that there's an extra layer of that sign and then trade. And if it happens in 2 minutes, it's obviously very suspicious. And so NBA fans are upset because they're looking, Bulls fans, Heat fans are like, why are we the teams that are being investigated? You go back to Milwaukee last year as well with the Bogdanovich thing. Why are we the teams being investigated when it's so clear what happened with Anthony Davis and the Lakers and with all these other teams? Why are we being picked on? Well, it comes down to what the league can regulate and what they can prove. It's much easier for the league to prove and thus punish the Heat and the Bulls that they had negotiations and they talked before that 6 p.m. deadline and they talked about sign and trade stuff and they talked about contracts. It's way easier to prove that than it is to prove that Anthony Davis and LeBron James had a conversation over dinner at some point in 2019 about him joining the Lakers. It all comes down to regulation and the ability of the NBA to prove wrongdoing. And so what it comes down to at the end of the day is all these teams are technically cheating. A lot of these players are technically cheating. But the problem that arises from this is not really that it's happening in the first place. It's that the NBA doesn't really have a way to solve it and or fix it. There's nothing that the league can do to prevent LeBron and Anthony Davis from having a conversation, even though Anthony Davis is under contract with the Pelicans. There's nothing the league can really do about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving talking about playing together in a couple of years. There's nothing the league can really do about teams discussing terms through these back channels about contract negotiations well in advance of that 6 p.m. Eastern time of free agency beginning. And with that issue specifically, it's become a thing where if you don't do it, you're gonna lose. It's like in a sport where steroids or doping becomes a significant issue. The reason it becomes such a big deal is because a couple people do it, they become really good, and then everybody else in the league feels like if I don't, I'm just going to lose. That's how the free agency stuff feels right now, where if you're starting your negotiations at 6, you're not getting any of the big free agents, and so you have to do what everybody else is doing, and that just leads to more wrongdoing and more cheating within the specific rules the NBA has set out. The only thing in my mind that the NBA can do to try and push back on the free agency stuff specifically is to hand out really significant punishments to the teams that they do eventually investigate, in this case being Chicago and Miami. The problem with that is it comes across as even more selective than it already has. People are already upset that it seems like they're getting mad about specific situations, Chicago, Miami, and not ones that are also very obvious, LA and LeBron. And if they come down hard on the Heat and the Bulls for this, let's say they take away draft picks, they fine them a ton, they can't reverse the signings and trades because you just can't do that, because then you're leaving Lonzo Ball out to dry. Nobody else has any money left. He can't go to Chicago. He's going to lose a ton of cash. So they can't do that. But unless you're taking away multiple first-round picks and a ton of cash from these teams, it's going to be really difficult for them to try and solve this issue. And again, even that route has its problems. And so essentially what this comes down to is the tampering issue, and everybody getting upset about it is essentially a joke at this point. There's nothing the league can do. It's a player-run league, and the wrongdoing and the tampering that's coming about is just kind of business as usual, and it has been for a little while here. And there's nothing the league can really do. Anthony Davis might have ended up in LA, whether LeBron and him ever had conversations or not, whether he was with Clutch or not. And there's not a whole lot that the NBA can really do with these guys. And I agree, by the way, that this is a huge problem. I don't want the Lakers to have even more of an advantage than they already do when it comes to being in LA and getting guys on cheaper deals than they would take elsewhere, by also having the ability to convince guys under contract, hey, you should come here, push yourself for a trade, you should trade here, because players already have every choice pretty much on where they go via trade or free agency, obviously. Players have already gotten so good at using their leverage, even guys with multiple years under their contract, to go where they want to go specifically. It's absolutely an issue. I just don't have any idea how the league is supposed to fix it or regulate it. You guys can let me know down in the comment section below what ideas you have, but it seems like an unfixable issue. And even though, yeah, it's technically cheating, I really struggle to understand what exactly the NBA is supposed to do about this. And so here we are. We're waiting on the Bulls and the Heat to find out what their punishment is going to be. And unless it is multiple draft picks and a ton of money, we're going to continue to see this every year. Teams negotiating well in advance of that 6 p.m. deadline. Players talking to each other about, oh, it would be cool if you played here or not there. And it's just going to continue to be an issue. And unless someone comes up with a magical solution tomorrow, this is just the NBA world that we live in, quite frankly. And yeah, that's going to be the end of the video. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Consider subscribing for more videos just like this, and check out my socials at the top of the screen as well. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.